What's going on, guys? You got Quasi here, Quasi Media Network and Quasi Animation Studio, where you presently are. Today, we're going to deal with teleportation, or rather, an effect. So, we're going to do some visual effect creation, and I'm hoping that this helps someone. Okay, so two things. One, right now the camera is off, so we're going to bring in a sphere. This is what I'm going to use. Let's use a sphere, and what I want to do with this sphere, instead of letting it stand up straight, I'm going to turn it on the X 90 degrees, and then we're going to hit all transform so the rotation is applied. Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to shade it smooth, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn on the preview, shader preview, and I'm going to come over and turn on bloom, because we're going to be using some emission. But let me make something really clear. I am not going to use just an emission shader. Okay, I'm gonna pull this down a little bit now. Excuse me, for the sake of it, let's rename this to teleport orb, and then over in the data properties, object data properties, we're going to rename it the same thing. And there's a reason for this, okay? Because I don't want to have any sort of mishap. So I'm going to just give it one shader. So we're going to use the principle, and I'm just going to call it teleport orb, the same thing. Okay. And then what I'll do, I'll push this up again. I'm sorry. All right. So what I'll do is, don't forget to save. Hit 3, because I want to see it from the side. And what we're going to use is the emission actually on the principal shader. Okay, so I'm going to bring in color ramp, a noise texture, going to control T with no wrangler, and then going to control shift and then click. Okay, so in doing that, what it allows me to do is also bring in a mixed shader. So, all right, now the color of this thing can be accordingly. I'm going to use green because I feel like it shows up better. All right, so I will open this up so I can see it at the same time, and then drag it over to this, and I'm going to give it a level of 120. Now, over here in the shader, I'm going to change it from generate to object. Okay, now I tend to use generated because sometimes object, when you move the object, I keep clipping. So sometimes when you move the object, what happens is that object, how do I say that? The texture moves with the object. Okay, so we're going to bring that color into the factor. And another thing I'm going to do, okay, so because we're using this, we hit N, go to options, and we're going to go down here to alpha blend. Okay, now the alpha blend sometimes warps what stuff looks like, so what we're going to do is probably switch it over to clip. I'm sorry, we're going to use the alpha here, and as you can see, it starts to change the tone of it. Okay, and now it's just dark. All right, so I'll bring it down to a certain point, and you see that the brightness isn't the same because of the back face. So what I tend to do is just tell it not to show the back face because I don't need it to. All right, so now, because the shader is set up the way it is, the dark side is going to brighten it up, and the light side is going to darken it up. Okay, because there's no shader here, what I'm going to do is bring in a transparent BDSF, and I'm changing my mind on this one part. Come on, thing. Changing my mind on this one part where I was going to use this instead, but let's just go ahead and crank it back up and just use the transparent. Okay, now the next thing is finding enough. So I'll keep the brightness roughly about where it's at. So now what I want to do is in here find how much would be useful. So I'll go 12. And then again, as I push up forward, I'm sorry, yeah, push this forward, it'll change that. So let's see what 6 does. Go with 6. Make this 6 on the detail, and the roughness like 0.62. Okay. And then I want a little bit of a break in the distortion. So I'll find, let's find that bit of place. So hold shift and you can move things. All right. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now we're going to use a little bit of, just a little bit of math, meaning going to use the equation pound frame. Okay. And I want this to move as it would think now, right? Come on, thing. I don't know what's been going on with my computer and thinking so much. All right. So I want this to constantly move. So I'm going to select all of these pound frame forward. So we do hash frame forward, and I'm going to make it a large number like 120. Okay. Now, for some reason, I haven't had this set up in here, and I should have my timeline. Okay. Don't forget to save. And then now we have it moving. So what I'll do is I'll make one of these a negative. I think it'll be this one. All right. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. All right. All right, so this will be the orb that brings in the character that we see start to come in. So I've been using this. So this is something I've started using recently for my season one of the series Rise of the Derulians that I do. Okay, I feel like it's not bright enough. So crank this one. There we go. All right. Now again, remember we're using the actual principal shader to do this. Okay, so that means that it'll show up better in renders. All right, so the next part is, this is the easy part. Now we get to play with some other stuff. So all right, now you see how it's not showing the back face, right? So if I come over here and I tell it to show I'm sorry, not the culling. Well, I do want it to cull, because when I come in I don't want it to show anything, as you see. So we'll have it culling because we have no reason to be inside of it. But when I say don't show back face, now when I show back face, this is what it looks like. And I tend to cut that off sometimes because I don't want any sort of like, I don't want it to be overworking. Sometimes things overlap. All right, but anyway, so let's bring in the next parts. So we're gonna bring in an icosphere. I'm gonna scale it down. I'm gonna apply that scale. And then over here, just by default, I'm gonna go particle. And then I'm going to, oh, I'm sorry, went the wrong way. Because the same thing with the orb here, it needs to turn the roughness all the way up in the specular down. Okay, so we're gonna use the emission. So on the base color, I'm gonna go black. And then I'll crank the emission up. I'm gonna make it about 60. And then I'm gonna make it green also. Okay, well, maybe 120. All right. Okay, do not forget to save. Now we're going to rename the the icosphere to particle. Okay, same thing over here. Rename it. This way, there's no confusion. So if you have to go find this and you just want a specific part, you don't have to go try to. Where is it? If you go look in mesh, then you can find it. If you look at object, you can find it. Okay. Excuse me. Now that particle, going to go into transform, and on the Z we're going to go -60 because you want it out of the view. We're not going to be looking at that. It's not going to be attached to anything. Now I'm going to take the actual orb, go to the particles settings, and then we're going to change it to, I think, 300. And then for right now, I'll set it to 10 and to go for, hold on, 10 plus 60. Okay. And then we'll give it a life of 30 and a random of 0.12. Okay. Source will be from volume. All right. So let's push it back. All right. And then on the render, of course, we're going to do the object and make it the particle. Okay, so I'm going to run it a little bit so I can see how big the particles are. I think they're big enough, 0.6. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to come over to field weights, and on gravity go 0. All right, so we'll hit play. All right, cool. Now, the next bit is to bring in force field. So let's hit 1. And I'm going to bring in a force field, and we're not going to turn these force fields off. Okay, so we're going to leave those on, but I will scale it down a little because I just want it somewhere in the middle of it. All right, now when I come over here, I'm going to make this, I think I did 3, no flow. Okay, so now when we use it, it'll push it out. Okay, no, I did 1, a flow of 1, so the flow should draw it back a little bit. Let's crank it up to see what happens. Okay, yeah, that's cool. All right, so well, 3 and 3. So let's go 3 and 3. Okay, now that force is set up. So now hit 1 again and go to another force, and we're going to use vortex. Now this vortex is going to be turned on the Y -90. Okay. All right, gonna snap it. So let's grab this. I'm going to snap it over just 1 and then duplicate it. Okay, so first off, to make sure that it's set properly, don't forget to save. I'm going to go 3 on this also, and an inflow of 0.3. Well, I'm sorry, 0.6. All right, and so look what it does. So you see how it starts to fold it a little. Okay, now what I want to do is on the force field, I'm gonna make that point. I'm gonna make that 2 on the push, so it pushes out further. Okay, yeah, cool. All right, now let's take that vortex and let's duplicate it. Okay, so I'm going to give it an actual duplicate. I'm going to duplicate it, Shift D. All right. Okay, and then I'm going to reset the rotation, and then rotate it on the Y90, and then snap it over 2 spaces. Okay, so this way now we get sort of this little. You see how it works? Okay, so now on the force field, I think I'm going to make it 2. Let's see what happens. Yeah. All right. So for the particle, let me beef that up a little bit. I feel like it's not, the life is too short. I'll make it 40. Okay, cool. So the vortex, I think I should make 6. I'd lie to you not, and let me show you why. Because on the force, I'm going to crank it up to 5. Just playing with it to see what happens. There we go. Okay. So with the force being like it is, I'll make it 4 instead with an inflow of 1. See what happens. Okay, so I feel like it's still too, I don't know what words to use, like it's too, like it's grabbing too much. Okay, so yeah, I'll take this to 6. All right, and then the flow of these will be 4 with an inflow of 1. Again, test, 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 play, play, play. All right, let's go. There we go. Now it should break loose, but it's not doing that. So I'm thinking for these, I'll give them no inflow. Uh-oh, I made it 10. Uh-oh, let's go. All right, see what happens. I think the force field should be, the flow should be 0 personally. Let's go back. I think it what? 120, so it's faster. Yeah. Yeah, because once this goes inward, let's say this goes inward, it starts to make that dissipate a bit. So let's take that back to 1. All right, so now what you want to do is select all of these, select the forces, the force field and the vortex force field, and then select the orb, and we're going to go control P and keep transform. This way now, if you need to move it to an object, they go together instead of them being separated, okay? Let's turn the snap off. And in this case, voila, go to playback. Let's turn it on. We have everything set. Come over here, I'm gonna make it completely black. Well, nah, I'll go back to 1, it's fine. All right, and then we hit play. Right, starts over. Right, so now what you get is if we animate this, pull this down. I'm not going to need the graph editor or the sequencer. Okay, so if we animate this, let's say come over here, let's turn on auto keying. We're only going to be using the scale, right? So we can take the scale back to 0, and let's just say let's start it at 10. Let's start it at 5. I'm sorry. So it 1 2 on the open, go back to 1, let it go because I know it's to like 70. Gonna control, hit I 1 2, hit them with a 0, right? So you see how that goes. So now let's say let's take it to 80. So that starts to dissipate it. Right, so now you get like this explosive movement. So now let's turn our camera on. All right, let's get it there tight. Let's lock it. All right. Don't forget to save and play. Oh. Yeah, there we go. All right. So now, because once it leaves, it means that there's no force field. So now the particles get to dissipate. And that's the part that makes it kind of cool. So when we look at the shader, there's nothing for the shader to do. So now, yeah, there you go. So it pops up. So now what I'm thinking is for this, I'll take this all the way back to, because it starts at 5. So let's crank this all the way back to 5. All right, there you go. So the particle system is what I want to adjust. All right, so if we go back to the particles, I want the particles, once it opens, whoop, and then the particles are started about 40. So let's take it to 40. 40, right? And then let's say 40 plus 30. No, 40 plus 60. Right, to 100, which is cool. So now we have a bigger explosion, right? But that also means that I need to adjust where this closes. So let's do it at 90. Yeah, so again, you can play with this and finesse it a little bit and go from there. So, yeah. Ta-da. Let me see something. This one particle is just lingering. And I don't know why, so let me do this instead. Say 30. Why is it lingering like that? It's interesting. Okay, so it needs to go past that. All right. Yeah, so there you go. Just something simple that isn't overly complicated, that allows you to have a different sort of import. It can be something that you use for a ship or a person, whatever you choose. I'm using it for my characters in ROD, so yeah. Well, I hope to help someone. I hope you learned something, And if you have any questions or anything like that, let me know. And I will answer accordingly. Nothing but love.